Today is April 7th, 2026, and welcome to Furniture Industry News. I'm glad you're here. There's a clear theme running through the latest updates across the furniture industry right now, and it really comes down to one word: value. What it means, how it's changing, and how both retailers and manufacturers are trying to keep up. The market isn't standing still, but it's definitely moving in a more deliberate, maybe even cautious direction. Let's start with retail, where we're seeing another long-standing independent call it a day. Waltman Furniture in Pennsylvania is closing after 75 years in business as its second-generation owner retires. The company dates back to 1951, built on a reputation for service and steady growth in its local market. Over the years, it expanded, added a second location, and eventually consolidated operations into a single showroom. Now, like many family-owned businesses, the final chapter is being written not because of failure, but because there's no next generation stepping in. A liquidation sale is about to begin, and the building itself is up for sale. This is something we keep seeing across the country. It's not always about poor performance. Sometimes it's just succession. And for independent retailers, that question of what happens next is becoming more and more important. At the same time, on the manufacturing side, there's a different kind of story playing out, especially around solid wood. Suppliers are leaning heavily into craftsmanship and material authenticity. Solid wood is not easy to work with. It requires precise processes, experienced labor, and tight environmental control. Everything from moisture content to glue application has to be just right. But when it's done well, it creates a product that stands out on its own. And that's exactly what some companies are betting on. Basset, for example, has built a $25 million business around its Benchmade line. The concept is pretty simple. Use solid wood, keep the design straightforward, and let the material speak for itself. That approach seems to be resonating. Other suppliers are taking similar paths, but with their own twist. Some are highlighting unique finishes, like olive ash burl, where the grain pattern becomes the focal point. Others are blending solid wood with engineered components to improve stability and prevent issues like expansion and contraction over time.
There's also a noticeable trend toward lighter finishes and materials like white oak, driven by consumer preference for more natural, earth-toned looks. But even that could shift quickly. As we all know, trends don't stay put for long. What's interesting is that behind all of this is a strong emphasis on sourcing. Whether it's domestic sawmills or global supply chains, the companies that seem to be doing well are the ones with stable, well-managed relationships upstream. Now, if you zoom out a bit and look at the overall market, the growth story is steady but not flashy. The U.S. furniture market is expected to grow from about $193 billion this year to roughly $232 billion by the end of the decade. That's a modest growth rate, but it's consistent. And the reason behind that growth is pretty telling. It's not driven by big housing booms or sudden spikes in demand. It's driven by everyday life. People replacing furniture, remodeling their homes, and buying things that actually fit how they live. Most of that spending is still concentrated in core categories like living rooms, bedrooms, and dining. The basics, the stuff that makes a house feel like a home. Wood continues to dominate as a material, but there's also growth happening in plastics and polymers, especially for more flexible, lightweight products. On the pricing side, mid-tier still leads, but premium is growing faster. Even in tighter times, people are willing to spend more if they feel like they're getting something that will last. And then there's the way people are buying. Direct-to-consumer and omni-channel sales now make up a significant portion of the market. Shoppers want to browse online, compare options, and then still have the ability to see and feel the product before making a final decision. That combination is becoming the standard. Which brings us to e-commerce, because that continues to grow as well. Online retail sales hit about $1.2 trillion last year, up more than 5%. Furniture is part of that, with estimates putting home furnishings at around $74 billion in online sales. Living room and bedroom furniture are leading the way online, and it's easy to see why. Consumers have access to detailed product descriptions, dimensions, and images that make it easier to visualize what they're buying.
But even with that growth, the store still plays a role. A lot of customers are researching online and then completing the purchase through a retailer's website after seeing the product in person. That blend of digital and physical is not going away. Now, on the flip side of all this, there's growing pressure from low-cost imports, especially what some are calling alphabet brands. These are typically China-based sellers using marketplace platforms, often with unfamiliar or algorithm-friendly names. Despite tariffs and higher supply chain costs, they're still gaining traction. And the reason is pretty straightforward: price. Consumers are being more careful with their spending, and many younger buyers aren't necessarily looking for something that will last 20 years. If it's affordable, easy to order, and shows up quickly, that checks the box. There's also the role of online marketplaces. Search algorithms tend to favor lower-priced items with strong sales velocity, which gives these brands more visibility. And since many of them are sourcing from the same factories, you end up with a lot of similar products competing primarily on price. For companies trying to compete above that level, it's a tough environment. You can't just match price, so you have to offer something more: better design, better quality, or a better overall experience. And just as that pressure is building, there's another challenge coming into focus: cost increases. Rising oil prices are starting to work their way through the system. Transportation costs are going up, which affects shipping and trucking. At the same time, suppliers of foam and other petroleum-based materials are already announcing price increases. Since so many components in furniture are tied to petrochemicals, this has a wide impact. Plastics, finishes, cushioning, it all gets more expensive. Over the past year and a half, a lot of the pressure has been on the lower and mid-tier segments. Now it looks like that pressure could move further up the chain. Which brings us right back to value. As prices rise, consumers become more selective. They're asking, is this worth it? And that puts the responsibility on retailers and manufacturers to answer that question clearly. It's not just about price anymore. It's about explaining why a product is worth the price. At the same time, consumer behavior is evolving in other ways too.
There's growing evidence that people are shopping based on their values, not just their needs. Nearly half of consumers say they would stop buying from a company if its positions don't align with their own, and a significant number have already participated in some form of boycott. We're also seeing more consumers using artificial intelligence to help with shopping. It's still a relatively small percentage overall, but it's growing, especially among younger shoppers. They're using it to find deals, compare products, and get inspiration. And one more thing worth noting: brand growth right now is being driven more by repeat customers than new ones. That's a shift. It means retention is becoming just as important, if not more so, than acquisition. Finally, there's the real estate side of the business. Retail construction is down year over year and well below long-term averages. Developers are facing higher land costs, higher construction costs, and higher interest rates, which makes new projects harder to justify. Even in strong markets, the numbers don't always work. So instead of large-scale expansion, we're seeing more cautious, selective growth, smaller footprints, fewer risks. And that lines up with what retailers are doing as well, expanding carefully, focusing on efficiency, and trying to make every location count. When you step back and look at all of this together, the picture becomes pretty clear. The furniture industry isn't in a boom, but it's not in decline either. It's in a phase of adjustment. Growth is steady, but it's grounded in real, everyday demand. Consumers are more thoughtful, costs are rising, competition is intense, and through it all, value is the central issue. For some customers, value means low price and convenience. For others, it means quality and longevity. The companies that can define that clearly and deliver on it are the ones that are going to stand out. That's what we're watching right now. Thanks for spending a few minutes with me today. If you found this helpful, be sure to subscribe so you can stay up to date on what's happening across the furniture industry.